Hello! So before we start our discussion this morning, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Cristel O. Soronio, Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Sciences. So I hope you all listen on my discussion. So our discussion this morning is very interesting and I'm so happy to share it with you all. Our topic this morning is all about the types of fluid flow. So what is fluid flow? Fluid flow is generally the motion of a fluid that is subjected to different unbalanced forces, right? It is the movement of liquids or gases. It encompasses the study of how fluids behave and interact with their surroundings, considering factors like velocity, pressure, and viscosity. Understanding fluid flow is crucial, right? In various fields like engineering, physics, and environmental science. And fluid flow has 6 types. First, the steady and unsteady, compressible and incompressible, viscous and non-viscous, rotational and irrotational, and last, 1, 2, and 3-dimensional flows. So, we will be discussing first the steady flow. What is steady flow? Steady in which the fluid characteristics like viscosity, velocity, pressure, and density, and etc. at a point do not change with time. The steady kuno, dili siya mo change at a time. While the unsteady, in which the fluid velocity, pressure, or density at a point changes with respect to time. While the unsteady, mo change siya respect at a point it changes with respect to time. When the fluid properties, velocity, pressure, temperature at any point in the system do not change with time, as I mentioned earlier, although they may vary from one point to another. In contrast, unsteady flow, also known as transient flow, involves changes in fluid properties at a particular point over time. Steady flow is often easier to analyze, while unsteady flow requires consideration of time-dependent factors. And we have also the examples of steady and unsteady flows. Okay? Take a look to the picture so that you would understand about what I've said earlier. This is the example of the steady and unsteady flow. And now, let's proceed to the second type of fluid flow. The uniform and non-uniform. What is uniform? In which the velocity of given time does not change with respect to space, length of direction flow. While non-uniform, in which the velocity of any time changes with respect to space. And this is the example of uniform and non-uniform flow. As you can see the picture, they have a different. Let's proceed to the third type of fluid flow. The laminar and turbulent. What is laminar? Laminar, in which the particles move along well-defined path or streamline. And turbulent, fluid moves in very irregular path or zigzag way. Velocity at a point fluctuates. Laminar is characterized by smooth and orderly fluid motion with layers moving parallel to each other. Turbulent flow, in contrast, involves chaotic and irregular fluid movement, often with swirling ideals and fluctuations in velocity. The extension is based on the fluid's Reynolds number and can impact factors like heat transfer and drag. And we have our example, and take a look in our example. This is the example of turbulent and laminar flow. And now, let's proceed to the next type of fluid flow, compressible and incompressible. Compressible, in which the density of fluid changes from point to point. The density is not constant for the fluid. And the incompressible, in which the density of fluid changes from point to point. The density is constant for fluid. And we have our example here. Take a look to our example. Compressible flows refers to the movement of a fluid where changes in pressure and temperature significantly impact its density. In compressible flow, the fluid can be compressed for expand, as you can see to the picture, leading to variations in density. Conversely, incompressible flow describes the behavior of fluid where changes in pressure have minimal impact on density. As you can see to our example, the airplane. And also, liquids like water are typically treated in incompressible because their density remains relatively constant under normal conditions. Incompressible flow simplifies fluid dynamics analysis, making certain assumptions about density changes negligible. Right? Okay. Our next type is rotational and irrotational. So what is rotational and irrotational? Rotational, in which the fluid particles while flowing along streamlines also rotate about their own axis. Naa sila'y kaugalingon. And while irrotational, in which the fluid particles while flowing along streamlines do not rotate about their own axis. So, ang rotational na ay ilang kaugalingon nga axis, while irrotational walay ilang kaugalingon nga axis. Rotational flow involves the swirling or spinning motion of fluid particles, introducing vortices. Irrotational flow, in contrast, lacks their rotational component, with fluid particles moving without swirls. Right? Irrotational flow simplifies fluid dynamics calculations often used in idealized scenarios. Okay, we have our example here. So, this is our example of rotational and irrotational flow. Now, let's proceed to our next type of fluid flow. The last type of fluid flow. 1, 2, and 3-dimensional, in which the fluid parameters such as velocity is function of time and one space coordinate only. The 2 is in which the velocity of function of time and 2 rectangular space coordinates. Well, three-dimensional flow, in which the velocity is function of time and 3 mutually perpendicular directions. And the type of fluid flow is one-dimensional flow is when fluid properties vary in a single direction, while typically along a straight line. Two-dimensional flow involves variation in 2 directions, often occurring in a plane. Three-dimensional flow considers variations in all 3 spatial directions, providing a more comprehensive direction of fluid behavior in a 3D space. The complexity increases from 1 to 3 dimensions, as I've mentioned earlier, 1 and 2 and a 3-dimensional fluid flow. And we have our example here of our 1 and 2 3-dimension, our last type of fluid flow. And that's the end of our discussion, and I hope you all have learned a lot from me, and see you all next time, and God bless.